Not because Hollywood had finally found a talented actor, not because another celebrity biopic was arriving with expensive trailers and nostalgic music. No, the shock came from something far more disturbing. For a few terrifying seconds, it looked like Michael Jackson had somehow walked back into the world. The eyes, the posture, the silent intensity. Even the way Jaafar tilted his head before speaking made audiences freeze as if they were staring at a ghost wearing Michael's skin again. And suddenly, the internet exploded with one frightening question nobody expected to ask in 2026. Did this film accidentally reopen wounds the world spent years trying to bury? When Jaafar Jackson appears on screen within just the first few seconds, people instantly understand why this role has created such emotional chaos behind Hollywood doors. Because this was never simply about acting. This was bloodline memory colliding with unfinished grief. Michael Jackson's own biological nephew standing inside the most dangerous role in entertainment history. Not just recreating Michael, but reviving the feeling of him. And according to insiders, that emotional impact hit hardest on the people who actually knew Michael personally. Not fans watching from theaters, real people from Michael's private life. People who once sat beside him when cameras disappeared. People who saw the loneliness behind the glitter. And among those names, two stood out immediately. Chris Tucker and Diana Ross. Two completely different chapters of Michael's life suddenly connected again through Jaafar's performance like pieces of a mystery Hollywood still cannot fully explain. Chris Tucker's reaction alone sent social media into complete meltdown. Because this was not ordinary celebrity promotion. Tucker looked emotionally shaken, excited, almost overwhelmed, and fans noticed instantly. This was the same Chris Tucker who once stood beside Michael inside You Rock My World back in 2001, when Michael was already trapped inside crushing fame, endless headlines, and suffocating public pressure. But Tucker brought something different into Michael's world. Laughter, chaos, warmth, freedom. In old footage from the You Rock My World set, Tucker almost seemed like the only person capable of making Michael temporarily forget the enormous weight hanging over him. The timing matters. By 2001, Michael Jackson was no longer simply a music icon. He had become a global obsession. Every movement dissected, every appearance analyzed, every silence turned into a headline. Invincible carried enormous expectations while media scrutiny surrounded him from every angle. Yet when Chris Tucker appeared beside Michael in that 13-minute video directed by Paul Hunter, something strange happened. Michael looked lighter, younger, human again. Fans noticed it immediately. Meanwhile, Tucker himself was already dominating Hollywood. Rush Hour had exploded into a worldwide phenomenon after earning more than $245 million globally. Rush Hour 2 became even bigger. Tucker did not need Michael for fame, which is exactly why their friendship fascinated people so deeply. It felt real, not transactional, not manufactured. Just two completely different superstars somehow understanding each other inside an industry built on masks. Then everything became darker in 2005. Michael Jackson's criminal trial transformed his entire life into a public battlefield. Celebrities quietly distanced themselves. Executives stayed silent. Hollywood suddenly became nervous about standing too close to him. But Chris Tucker still appeared, not for publicity, not for cameras. He appeared inside court as a defense witness during the Santa Barbara trial that ended June 13, 2005, when Michael was found not guilty on all 10 charges. Tucker testified about the Arvizo family and described feeling manipulated after initially helping them. That moment changed how people viewed his relationship with Michael forever. Because laughter during success is easy. Standing beside someone during global humiliation is different. That is why Tucker's emotional response to Jaafar Jackson carries such enormous weight today. When Tucker said he had already watched the Michael film twice and planned to watch it again, fans heard something deeper hidden underneath those words. It sounded like recognition, like someone reopening a locked emotional room he thought had disappeared forever. And then comes Diana Ross, the silence surrounding her somehow louder than everybody else combined. Because before Michael became the king of pop, before Thriller, before moonwalks and screaming stadiums, there was Motown. There was Diana Ross Presents the Jackson 5. That title alone permanently connected Diana to Michael's origin story. Motown strategically used Diana's image to introduce the Jackson 5 to America in 1969, and suddenly a tiny boy with an impossible voice became a national phenomenon almost overnight. But Diana Ross was never just marketing decoration. transformation in Michael's life. She became something emotionally far more complicated. By the late 70s, Michael openly spoke about Diana with unusual emotional honesty. During interviews, he admitted loving her deeply. In Moonwalk, he later confessed feeling hurt and jealous when Diana married, not because their relationship fit neatly into romance. It didn't. That's exactly what made it mysterious. Diana represented protection, guidance, admiration, emotional safety, something Michael desperately searched for throughout his life while fame slowly swallowed him whole. And perhaps the biggest proof of trust came in 2002, when Michael named Diana Ross as backup guardian for his children in his will if Jaafar Jackson could not fulfill the role. That detail alone revealed how deeply Diana existed inside Michael's emotional foundation, which makes her near disappearance from the Michael film feel incredibly suspicious. Kat Graham reportedly filmed scenes as Diana Ross, but those scenes were later removed due to legal complications before release. Suddenly, audiences began asking dangerous questions. Why erase such a critical figure from Michael's life story? Was Hollywood protecting something, avoiding something, or simplifying a relationship too emotionally complicated to explain cleanly on screen? Even reports claiming Diana Ross had little interest in watching the film only deepened the mystery further. Because maybe for Diana, Michael was never a cinematic character to revisit. Maybe he remained too real, too personal, too painful to reconstruct through Hollywood lenses. And that is where Jaafar Jackson's performance becomes truly haunting. Because according to reactions from people like Chris Tucker, Jaafar somehow crossed the impossible line between imitation and resurrection. He did not merely recreate Michael's movements. He recreated emotional memory, the softness, the fragility, the sadness hidden underneath the perfection. That was always the tragedy surrounding Michael Jackson. The world loved him endlessly, yet also consumed him endlessly. People demanded magic while forgetting there was still a fragile human being trapped underneath the spotlight. Every spin, every performance, every public appearance carried crushing expectations no normal person could survive forever. What terrified Hollywood most was never whether Jaafar Jackson could dance like Michael. It was whether audiences would emotionally believe him. Because Michael Jackson was not built like ordinary celebrities. His image was stitched together from contradictions nobody could fully explain. One moment he looked untouchable, almost supernatural, commanding entire stadiums with a single frozen pose. Then off stage, people described him completely differently. Soft-spoken, fragile, painfully shy, sometimes almost childlike. That contradiction became the hardest thing for Jaafar to capture, and according to insiders, it is exactly what left people emotionally wrecked after watching the film. Chris Tucker's reaction suddenly made much more sense once fans realized this. Tucker was not praising choreography. He was reacting to emotional memory. He had seen Michael privately. He knew the difference between the public mask and the exhausted human being underneath it. So when Tucker told audiences they needed to watch the film immediately, many fans interpreted it almost like a warning, as if he had witnessed something disturbingly accurate inside Jaafar's performance, something that dragged him emotionally backward into years he thought were gone forever. And that emotional chaos became even stronger because the film itself arrived carrying enormous controversy before audiences even entered theaters. This was not simply a nostalgic music biopic. The Michael Project carried the fingerprints of Michael's estate, legal teams, and people deeply invested in protecting his legacy. The budget was massive. The pressure was even bigger. Every scene suddenly felt politically dangerous because Michael Jackson's life still divides the public like almost no celebrity in history. Some viewers walked out of theaters in tears, calling the movie a restoration of Michael's humanity. Others walked out furious, accusing Hollywood of carefully polishing the safest parts of his story while avoiding the darkest storms entirely. That debate exploded online immediately after release because people noticed something very quickly. The film heavily focused on the years audiences felt safest loving Michael, the Jackson 5 era, Motown, Thriller, Bad, the glorious years when Michael still looked untouchable, magical, almost universally adored. Every generation now seems to want a different version of Michael Jackson. Longtime fans want the artist remembered for genius instead of scandal. Skeptics want every ugly chapter exposed openly. Legal observers study the missing scenes and behind-the-scenes edits like detectives searching for hidden truths. Younger audiences simply want to understand why Michael's name still creates so much emotional violence decades after his death. And perhaps the strangest part of all is Diana Ross, because her absence somehow became louder than many people actually appearing inside the film. The woman connected to Michael's earliest emotional memories almost vanished from the final cut entirely, and fans immediately sensed something unsettling hidden underneath that decision. Diana represented the beginning, before fame mutated into something monstrous, before the lawsuits, before the surgeries, before the isolation, before Michael became trapped inside the suffocating machine of global obsession. Maybe that is why her silence feels so haunting now. Chris Tucker looked at Jaafar Jackson and publicly celebrated what he saw. Diana Ross reportedly stayed distant from the entire production, one response loud with emotion, the other buried inside silence. And somehow together, those two reactions explain Michael Jackson's life better than the movie itself ever could. Because Michael was always split into two realities: the public icon the world endlessly consumed, and the deeply private human being very few people truly understood. Now, Jaafar Jackson has stepped directly into that impossible space between myth and memory, between performance and resurrection, between Hollywood storytelling and emotional truth. And perhaps that is why audiences cannot stop arguing about this film after the credits end, because deep down people sense something uncomfortable lingering underneath the applause.